It says that I'm recording now. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are not here, we are going to be posting this video to the website as soon as possible later this week. So happy February. For those of you who worked on the middle school competition, welcome back. You are the seasoned professionals and can certainly share your words of wisdom, tricks and tips about how to do mock trial virtually with others. For those of you who I've not seen since last year, it's so great to see you. I wish we were together in person. I consider it a crowning glory of being able to accomplish all of our regional competitions last year. The day after the last competition, I think it was the one in Sioux City, we had to basically shut the whole thing down and then tried to postpone the high school the state tournament, and then finally had to cancel it. I know many of you had seniors that were graduating last year who were very disappointed. I was crushed. That's one of the highlights of being able to see those accomplishments of those great kids, who some of whom I've seen since they were in 6th grade. So that kind of became the guiding principle between the realization that we weren't going to have any mock trial anymore in April, and vowing to get something put in place so we would have mock trial this year. Of course, we all hoped that the pandemic would be long past, but silly us, we didn't realize that pandemics are pandemic and last for a good long time. And so along with a small committee at the national level, we worked all summer trying to put together some plans on how to do mock trial virtually. I had a chance to judge a couple of competitions, one that was based in Utah that was a national competition, another one that was actually a national competition in South Korea. It meant that I had to get up really early in the morning, but it was interesting to see how different teams and different places handled virtual mock trial. But it's one thing to kind of dream big and say, all right, this is what we're going to do. And it's another thing entirely to actually then go and do it. Fortunately, I had someone who volunteered early in the summer to help out. And boy, she did not understand what she was getting into. But boy, I'm so glad that she did, because number one, Lauren is so much younger than I am and so much more technically adept than I am, that she pulled me kicking and screaming into the 21st century in the use of technology. So before I go any further, for those of you who have not met her, I want to recognize Lauren and ask her to say a few words of introduction of how you got to be here, and anything else you want to impart.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Barnes. I'm a graduate from Hempstead High School here in Dubuque, Iowa. In the fall, I'm going to be heading to George Washington University in DC. I've gotten the amazing chance to work with Mr. Wheeler as a mock trial intern, and I'm excited to continue working with him through this high school. Thanks so much.
So one of the things that Lauren accomplished, among the many things that Lauren accomplished, was creating all of the forms and techniques and websites and all the information that we needed to make things go from in-person to virtual. And later on in the program, I'm going to ask her to share the screen so you can see what the new virtual ballot looks like, the virtual comment form. Those are two things that we are seriously considering, even once we are back in person, to save, because the ballots are really slick. It does the math for us. It does not let you submit a ballot if there's not a score written in there. And then when it's done, it pings my phone so that I know immediately when a trial is done. In the same way for the comment forms, first of all, I've found in my own life that I can certainly type a lot faster than I can write. And so being able to type out comments and then at the end of the comment form, clicking submit and getting it to my phone as well, it might make getting comments to you, A, more legibly, and B, quicker than the normal system of ripping and stuffing in the ballot in the envelope, and then trying to get you to understand that judges don't A, have great penmanship, and B, don't press hard enough in order to get through all 3 copies of that ballot. So I think you'll be pleased by what you see and by what Lauren has created. So let me first of all start with what I think is news that you already expected. I told you that on or about February 1st, we would have an announcement, and it is February 1st. We have decided that given the continuing pandemic and in consultation with folks at Public Health, that we will be all virtual this year. The state tournament as well at the end of March. We just don't feel comfortable pulling students in to a large event at the event center or at another venue, having hundreds of people sharing the same space. This is not unexpected. I think it's fair in 2 respects. One, the preliminary and playoff rounds will be done virtually, and so the state tournament will follow that same format. The national competition we already announced earlier this year would be all virtual as well. And so it benefits whatever team is advancing to the national competition and representing Iowa. They will have had more rounds of competition under their belt in this format. Now, the national competition may have some additional rules about how to zoom in. We are trying to be as flexible as possible because different school districts have different limitations, different protocols, and we want to, basically in the spirit of equity, we want students to be able to participate the best way that they can, and that may be different from district to district. So I'm going to start off by just explaining a couple of different ways that you can choose to Zoom virtually. I have a list of about, I think I counted it up, about 24 points that I wanted to make. If any time along the way you want to interrupt, ask a question, you can do one of 2 things. You can either just go ahead and unmute yourself and interrupt me. I don't mind. I prefer it. Or number 2, you can put in the chat box at the bottom. If you chat, post a message to all. I'm trusting Lauren to see that message, and then she can interrupt me. She doesn't mind doing that and saying, can you answer this question? So it should be a lot of common ground, but if you've got some specific questions, I want to make sure that those are addressed as well. So first of all, how you do the whole Zoom thing. There are basically 3 or 4 different ways that teams can do this. A 5th way is whatever you dream up and just run it past us to make sure that it's all, we're on the same page. The first option would be a more traditional approach, which is all the students in the same room. You're just not in the same courtroom. But if you've got a socially distanced and masked group of students, attorneys situated, witnesses situated, timekeepers situated, you have a wide angled lens, and you have a microphone that can pick up all of the students, that is one way to do it. I would certainly practice with the angles and how good the microphone picks up sound. The other, kind of in the opposite extreme, is for each student to be on their own device in their own location. So under scenario A, you would have probably just 1 or maybe 2 links to Zoom. Under alternative B, you would have 8 to 10 or 12 or 15 links to Zoom. And everyone is in their own location, everyone doing their own thing, staying muted and off camera until it was their time to go. In between those, there are a couple of different options. One would be most students all in one spot, let's say the attorneys all in one spot with a witness that's sequestered in a different space on their own camera, on their own device. For those of you who are planning that first option, everyone in the same room, one thing that we noticed at the middle school level is that, that no matter where the witness was situated, if you're trying to get both the attorney and the witness in the same camera, you're going to lose some resolution. If you really want to make sure that the witness is seen, the better option is to put the witness on their own camera. And we've also found that if you put them on their own camera in the same room, you risk some feedback issues on the audio. So find another space for the witnesses, make sure that they've got a neutral background so you can really focus on the student and not on the kind of the crazy background. And that way you can have the attorneys all gathered one place and the witness gathered another on two different devices and go back and forth that way. Another option is to have multiple students on their own devices but shared space so that the attorneys aren't necessarily passing a laptop from one to another, but are instead, kind of, it's their turn to log in. There's a continuum of options. Whatever works best for you. You don't need to let us know ahead of time. If you want some technical advice, Lauren and I are happy to give the benefit of what we saw. We didn't actually try it, so we can always track down mock trial coaches from middle school, and you can pick their brains about what they chose to do and how they might do it differently. Lord help us. I'm hoping that we don't have to do this again next year. So this is a one-time deal, but we're really good at it now. So how the competition is going to work is, you registered or you are in the process of registering. Once you register, which is basically, yeah, we plan to participate and here's how many teams we think we're going to have. The next process is that I send you an email back and say, well, congratulations. This is how many teams I think you have. Here are your team codes. This is the competition code that you'll compete under the entire time. And here's a link to a preference form. It's rather than divide the state into regionals, we're dividing the state into preliminary rounds, and that's based on when you are able and available to participate. We understand that some students may not be able to participate during school hours, and so we give an option of after school, either 4:30 or 6 o'clock. Or some students may not be able to participate Monday through Friday, so we have a Saturday that they might be able to go. Some students may be able to just do the traditional regional competition, in which case you tell me, we can all do it on that Monday or that Thursday or Friday, and I will schedule you 2 rounds on that day. Do the best we can. You have 24 different time options to choose from to get 2 trials in, once as P and once as D. And even if you know that someone who's only has an active role on the plaintiff side has to do it on a Monday, you let me know. We have to be plaintiff on Monday and we have to be defense on whatever other day, and we will make it work. It makes the pairings somewhat less random because I'm pairing teams within those 24 blocks. I don't know that it's any less random than a regional competition where you've got, only 4 schools, each with 3 teams, and they're not supposed to play each other. And so it just, we're going to have to work through the pairings based on their day and time preference. The second step from there is a playoff round. So we're going to keep the same format that we used for middle school, and that is to have a 24-team state tournament instead of 32. So the 24 teams will be determined by your performance, first of all, in those 2 preliminary rounds. Some teams may advance to the state tournament directly if they score an enormous amount of points, win both. So the 2-0, large number of points, they might go directly to the state competition. The others who are the next ones would then have to qualify through a playoff round. So I'm going to use the middle school competition as the primary example. We had, out of the 24 teams, 9 teams that qualified directly for the state competition. That means we needed 15 more teams to round out our state field. So we took the next 30 teams. And those teams were paired as power ranked as best as possible, but also power ranked and determined by your preference for when that playoff round could take place. That would be the next week. So again, if there is only one day that you can possibly do a playoff round, you need to express that either on that preference form, or you can now email me and say, okay, I didn't understand the whole preference form playoff thing, but if we qualify the playoffs, really the only time we can do it is this day and this time, or these days and these times, so that we can do that accordingly. In the playoff round, the team that wins each trial will advance to the state tournament. The state tournament at the middle school this year, we involved 2 preliminary rounds at the state competition. Every team was plaintiff once and defense once. The first round was completely randomized. The second round was power matched to the best ability. And then we went to a quarterfinals, a semifinals, and a championship round. I have an email out to my committee to consider whether we want to continue that process that we used at middle school, or whether we try to make a third round for everybody work. Really, it's a Zoom capacity and judge availability issue. And so we're going to consider that. But right now, my inclination is to keep the format that we used at middle school, but I can be talked out of that if my committee feels strongly another way, or if you all feel strongly another way. It's just a matter of getting the right number of judges available at the right time. When I get those preference forms and I can see when everyone would like to participate, you'll be getting an email from me that says you will be plaintiff on this day and this time, and you'll be defense on this day and this time. You won't know at that point your opponent, but you will be able to communicate with your students and any observers when you'll be going, or get notice out to, if it's during a school day, notice out to school administrators and teachers that the students might be absent or unavailable that day. I don't know if going back full time is going to influence your decisions. I know in some instances, for example, my son's instance, he's all virtual anyways, so he has to let his virtual teachers know that he's not going to be available. But in other situations, it would be like if you were getting on a bus and going to a regional competition, just saying we're going to be gone this day. Approximately the day before your competition, hopefully 2 days before your competition, you'll get another email from us that has the Zoom link for your trial. It'll have your courtroom assignment by number, and then it will have also the code for your opposing team. We'll also then attach the roster from the opposing team so that you know in advance the names of the students and their pronoun preferences. So, if you're practicing with Taylor being male, and then all of a sudden you get to the competition, you find that Taylor is a female, that sometimes causes an issue. We always tell our judges that pronoun slippages happen and they shouldn't necessarily take that into consideration, but it's always best if you get the pronouns correct. There also may be students who decide to not use the traditional he or she, and there are options there, and that prepares you in advance. So some of you have already looked at the roster form. The roster form needs to be completed hopefully by the 15th of this month, so that we can then get our web person to post them on the judge's website and be prepared to send them out to you. You'll notice that there are 2 different versions. Actually, you just submit one version, but when it comes to Lauren and I, it actually splits it. So there is a public version that only has your team code and then the names of the students and what roles they're playing. There's a private version that Lauren and I keep that actually identifies your school and your coaches and coach contact information. So that way we know if there's an issue, how to contact you and who this team is and how to troubleshoot. So don't be alarmed by us asking you on your team form or your roster form to identify the school and the coach and coach contact information. That will not go out to judges or to opposing teams. That will stay with Lauren and I or anyone else who's the Zoom host for a particular trial. So all of that's precursor to the actual competition. The next thing is probably the most important thing for Lauren and I, if whoever's being the Zoom host, and that is the renaming protocol. And so I'm just going to go ahead and rename myself. If you click on your own little, your tile, there's an opportunity in the corner with 3 ... And one of the pull downs is rename, and it pops up and you can rename yourself. And our renaming protocol is pretty simple. First would be the courtroom number, and then would be your team code. And then if you were an active participant in a, so I've just changed mine there. So courtroom number first, you don't have to spell out courtroom, just the number, then the team code. And if you are an active student participant, put your last name. If you are a coach, put coach. If you are an observer, put observer. If you are a judge, we will be telling the judges to go ahead and just put 1-judge and then their last name. And that way we can then help with the assignment. The thing that's going to take the most patience is when you first log in, Lauren and I have to sort you into your appropriate courtroom. And if the first thing we see is a number, we're going to put you in that courtroom. At the state competition, we have 12 courtrooms going. And so the sorting process takes a while. At the regional competitions for middle school, the most number we ever had at one time was 9. And so we were able to sort a lot quicker. If you happen to be in one of those times that there's not a lot of people wanting to be in, it may even go quicker still. Our option is going to be to open the Zoom room a half hour before the competition begins. So if you have that 8:30 a.m. round, at about 8 o'clock, the Zoom will be open. And anyone who wants to log in will be sorted into their appropriate courtroom. You may have to sit for a while, because as you know, in mock trial, we never start early, and we rarely start on time. But if we actually have team members and judges and they're ready to go, once we assign the judges to your courtroom, the trial should begin. Our experience for middle school is that while Zoom takes a little longer, it doesn't take so long that it's not something that it's going to be something that drags on. At the middle school level, we gave 3.5 hours between trial blocks. In some instances, because of our delay in getting judges to rooms and people logging in and a few technical difficulties, we were right up against it. And so for high school, we've allowed an extra half hour. So they are paired 8:30, 12:30, 4:30. And as I mentioned in some emails, if you're competing at that 6 o'clock trial, you cannot participate at the 4:30 time that same day, because there's no way the trial is going to be over in an hour and a half. But that gives another option, and it doesn't run too late. Sometimes that 6 or 6:30 option went kind of long into the night, and there were some parents who were complaining that their student had missed their bedtime, and we want to avoid the wrath of parents. So we've arranged it that way. So the naming protocol, we'll send some reminders out as well, but that's the most important thing to get across to your students. The people who had the most problems were not the students, were not the coaches, were not the judges, they were the observers, especially, not to be ageist, but some of the grandparents who are not as technologically adept couldn't quite figure out the whole naming protocol. Fortunately, as hosts or co-hosts, Lauren and I can change that name for you. And so after we assign students to rooms, we can then work individually with people who are having some difficulty in getting them where they need to be. Once the competition starts, if you log in, you may find that your previous login and naming protocol is still there. And in our haste, we may assign you to the wrong courtroom. So for example, if I'm now on defense and I'm still ABC Wheeler, but I'm now in courtroom 3 on this particular day, and I don't get to my renaming, some smart person like Lauren is going to say, oh, he's got a 1, let's put him in courtroom 1. And then I'm wondering, okay, why am I in courtroom 1 when I need to be in courtroom 3? Fear not, if you've been wrongly assigned to a particular courtroom, all you need to do is leave your breakout room, not leave the meeting entirely, but usually in the far right-hand corner, there's a button, a red button that says leave, or there's a button that says, leave breakout room or leave meeting. You don't want to leave the meeting because then you'll have to log back in. But if you leave the breakout room, it'll pop you back into the waiting room, and we can then reassign you to where you actually want to be. It happens quite a bit. And for those of you who are coaches of multiple teams, if your both teams are going at the same time, that is always an option for you. It's easier just to do it one time and get it all over with. I can toggle you back and forth between multiple rooms. All you need to do is okay, I've seen the opening and the plaintiff's witnesses for my one team. Can you now assign me to a different courtroom so I can see the other team's defense witnesses and closings? And it's easily done. So not a problem. I noticed that someone asked a question about number of observers. My experience has always been that at the high school level, there are significantly fewer observers than there are at the middle school level. At the middle school level, we always think the students are so cute, and we want to make sure that we all come out to support them. At the high school level, well, I still think that they're cute. I have one myself, but perhaps it's not as important for the parents and relatives to come out to support. Be that as it may, for the most part, the Zoom unit that we'll be using has a 500 person limit. So we have the Zoom Plus with the expanded meeting capacity, so it has 500 people. In most instances, you can have as many observers as you like. If we find that it's going to be a problem, then we will go ahead and send out a hard limit. For the state competition, if we have 24 teams, we are going to put an original limit on that so that each team can have up to, I think it was, 7 or up to, I think it was up to 17 or 18 logins, and that included students. So if it was the students first and they were all on their own, that was 12, then you could have up to 6 additional people. If it was the students are all on the same login, then you could have up to 19 additional ones. Mostly, I have found that if you get over 500, it does not let the 501st person go straight back in. So we have a hard cap at 500. But for the preliminary rounds, playoff rounds, I do not see an issue. Someone just asked about recording. Lauren and I had this great plan that our web guy immediately shot down, and for good reason. Our plan originally was to go ahead and tape every single mock trial and then save it on the cloud and give you access and all of that, until he explained to me exactly that would make the ISBA server crash and may never come back up because of the amount of storage capacity needed for every single trial. So we will only be taping the championship round, possibly the semifinal rounds. You, however, have the ability to tape trials. And there are 3 things that you need to do. Number 1, you have to ask the opposing team if they are willing to be recorded. Unless there's a school policy that prohibits recording like that, I'm guessing the answer is going to be yes. Clear it with the judges. Your Honor, we're planning on recording this trial, and they'll have instructions to say yes. And then the third thing is that whoever's planning on actually physically recording, needs to pop back out into the waiting room, and whoever the Zoom host is, Lauren or I most likely, we have to actually click a button that allows you to record. Then you go back into your breakout rooms, you hit the record button, and you then have the trial. I am asking you on your honor, however, not to share that trial recording with other teams, so that they get kind of a insider view of the defense case of a particular team. If it's being shared with grandparents, if it's being shared with moms and dads, that's fine. But for competitive purposes, I don't want a lot of scouting or file sharing of that sort. Our plan originally at middle school would be basically to sequester those recordings until after a team was eliminated. And once the team was out of the competition, then we would go ahead and post it. But again, our IT person quickly disabused of us of that notion that we would be able to record every single trial. So we're not even going to try this time. So you do have the ability to record, clear it with the opposing team, clear it with the judge, and then you need to pop back out and either Lauren or I can grant you permission to record those trials. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the score sheet, the nomination form that's at the bottom of the score sheet, and the comment form. So Lauren, this might be a good time for you to share the screen and show everyone what the ballot looks like and the comment forms.
Will do.
Okay, so you see that
So
it's, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I have the virtual ballot up.
Okay, so you'll see that on the top, there's the plaintiff and defense codes. Those are preloaded or will be preloaded with your team codes. So the judges will just have to find the team code for the plaintiff and team code for the defense. They enter those, they enter the round number, they enter their name, phone number, email, contact information. And then as they're scoring particular aspects of the trial, they have options 0 to 10 and half-point increments. You'll notice that on the ballot, some of the things have that red asterisk. Most of them have the red asterisk. That means that they cannot submit that ballot unless there's something filled in that space. So that helps us with them potentially skipping a score. You know, I've done it myself where I've said, oh, I'm going to come back to that one once I've seen all of the cross examinations, and then I'll fill them in and I forget. And then it's up to the competition coordinator to hunt me down and check when the ballots come in to check the scores. This prevents that. You cannot physically submit that form until all the boxes are filled in. So you'll see there's also a spot where it says plaintiff case in chief, where it says P witness 1. That's actually a listing of all 3 plaintiff's witnesses, and the judge just needs to click on which witness it is that they are looking at. This is the middle school one, so it has the fall characters. It will be redone with the high school codes and the high school characters. And then it continues down from the plaintiff's case in chief. Go ahead and scroll down, Lauren, to the defense case in chief, same thing. The plaintiff and defense codes automatically populate. So when they first clicked on them at the top of the ballot, it will transfer down. So go ahead and scroll down some more. Closing arguments, the same. Overall team score, and then it will actually do the math for us and total up it'll transfer the codes, total up the scores, and then give us a plaintiff result and a defense result of either win or lose. That's also a great way to tell us if there's a tie, because if there is a tie, it will say you need to break the tie, and you'll have to adjust the score. Usually it's a team score that you give a team an extra half point or take a half point away. Then there's the nomination opportunity. It's the same as what was on the bottom of our page 5 of the written ballot, where they would type in the student's name and click whether they were plaintiff or defense. You can nominate up to 3 attorneys and up to 3 witnesses. And the same is true at the bottom. If you choose not to nominate anyone in a particular round, you can type your initials in that box. And then at the end, the judges hit submit. And as I said, it goes straight to my phone. And I know that the round is getting close. I can eyeball the math, do the math on select ones, and make sure that our system is working. So that's the electronic ballot. And again, based on the response that we received from middle school, we are hoping to be able to figure out a way to continue to use this even when we're in person. It makes the tabulation room a lot easier. Lauren, you want to go ahead and share the comment form as well? So the comment form is basically a couple of big empty boxes. So you still got the plaintiff code and defense code drop downs, the round, the same judge information. And then under each aspect of the trial, you type the student's name, and then you can start writing comments about the opening statement. The person who helped us develop this is a friend of ours in South Carolina, Donald Lanier. And Donald actually transferred, I think it was Lincoln's second inaugural address, cut and pasted it in there. That fits. So for every comment. So if there is a particularly, I don't know what the written version of loquacious is, but if they really want to write a lot, they can really write a lot. It's not going to cut people off. Unlike the print ballots where you only get that one little box. If you write big, you can only write maybe 2 or 3 comments. If you write small, then obviously no one can read them. This, if they're just typing normally, they can type thousands of characters in each box. So it just follows, again, the course of that, the trial. We separated the comment form from the score form, the score sheet, so that if judges, the most important thing for judges is to get that score sheet to us, but they can take their time with the comment form. A lot of people are still more comfortable writing notes on a notepad and then transferring it. Or if you were like me and you were scoring from South Korea and had just had one computer laptop, it's tough to toggle between a comment form, a score sheet, and the actual trial going on. And so I had a score sheet up and I had the trial up, but I was writing notes to myself in the comment form, and then I went back and filled out the comment form afterwards. And just scroll all the way down to the bottom, Lauren. There's that same submit button at the bottom that then you just click on it and it gets, again, to my phone. Makes it really easy for Lauren and I to make it into a PDF and then get it to particular coaches so that you can read the actual comments. And the great thing about this is that you can, in fact, read the comments because they are typing it, not scrawling it. So that's the score sheet, the nomination form on the score sheet, and the comments. Are there any questions that you have about any of the things we've covered so far? All right, that was my way of getting more caffeine. Yes, Judge?
I found that it's helpful to ask the teams specifically the order of their witnesses. In one round, in the middle school, I asked if their witnesses were in the, certain order, or whether they'd changed the order, and they said, no. Well, they had changed the order, and we didn't find out until we're well into the trial. So I just went through and said, is your first witness Tori Rhodes? Is your second witness Taylor Kolowski? For each time, and it just took a few seconds to do that, and that way we didn't have to change in the middle.
And that is something that we're going to advise the judges during pretrial to ask two things. One would be, can you share with us and with the other team the order in which you plan on calling your witnesses? That's something that normally is done when you share those print ballots ahead of time before the judges come in. Well, there's no sharing of the print ballots, and so we don't want there to be any surprises. The other thing that we're going to ask judges, they will have access in advance to the roster forms. And so if there are any changes to those roster forms, we understand that there may be students who are ill, students that have other conflicts, last minute substitutions that need to take place. And we'd rather have the judges know that in advance and be able to be prepared for that than type the wrong student's name in a wrong spot because that was what was on the roster that was submitted. We're hoping that you will submit your rosters by February 15th, which gives us 2 weeks before the beginning of the regional competitions. And a lot can happen in those 2 weeks. And so we completely understand that there will be changes to the rosters needed. And so that would be the appropriate spot, is rather than try to change the roster that's submitted, is just notify the judges during pretrial that there has been a change and everyone's on the same page. so that the judges will have access to some things before the trial starts. Number one, they will have the Zoom access, the Zoom code. They'll know which courtroom they're in. They'll have access to your rosters. It'll be those public rosters, not the private rosters. So they won't know what the team is. They'll just know your code and whether it's P or D. We're going to post on that judge website. Let's say we have 80 teams like we did at the middle school level. There will be 80 teams worth of plaintiff rosters, and on another separate section, 80 teams worth of defense rosters. So they'll only download or only print out the side of the code that's representing that side. So if ABC is plaintiff, they will only print out ABC plaintiff roster. If XYZ is defense, they will only print out XYZ defense roster. The judges also will have access to all of the case materials, the rules, and most importantly, they will also have a separate file that includes all of the exhibits. So the judges will have the exhibits ahead of time. The opposing team will have exhibits ahead of time. And so that usually is kind of your biggest question, your biggest concern is how do we enter stuff into evidence when we're all in different spots? So I'm going to go ahead and jump to that right now. So rather than physically offering exhibits into evidence, I would suggest that instead your student who is planning to enter it would say, we're referring to exhibit one. Exhibit one, I think it's the map, is that correct? The map of the SOP. So we'll be referring to exhibit one, which is the map of the Schnur Outdoor Pavilion. You should all have access to that exhibit. Then you go ahead and start with the questions to the witness based on that to lay the proper foundation and then offer it into evidence. So there's no physically sharing of an exhibit. If you want to, this is not mandatory, it is optional. If you want to refer to an enlargement, then that's where that share screen function works. That you can have your tech advisor, because remember, we're allowing an extra team member this year to serve as a tech advisor, or the students themselves, whoever you want to do it, would share the screen to show that enlargement, exhibit one enlarged. I will tell you from a strategy standpoint that that's always a good idea because it draws the judge's attention to specific things, but do not fall into the trap of once you've shared something of leaving it on the screen. Because what happens is when you share the screen, that's the majority of the screen. 75% of the screen is going to be that exhibit, leaving only one of those small Zoom tiles of the witness and the attorney. And it's hard for judges to see things like facial characteristics or emotion if it's the poor grieving spouse of the deceased. And so, use it strategically, but you don't have to use it at all. The question is about the demonstratives, opening and closing things. You can do that prior to when the judges are coming in. You'll have lots of time. And if you just pick out either someone from the other team and say, here's the things that we're planning on using that are not exhibits, not included in the case materials that we're planning on using as our demonstratives during opening and closing, and then see if there are any objections. The presiding judge will have his or her camera on the entire time. Whether they stay muted and then continue to mute and unmute, mute, unmute is entirely up to them. The scoring judges are given the option, and usually as a judging team, they decide either all of the judges will remain on camera so that the students actually have someone to present to, or if you are a scoring judge and not a presiding judge, whether you also turn your camera off and mute so that what's on camera is only the most important folks, who are the students themselves, and then the presiding judge. So that addresses that it may vary from trial to trial. I haven't quite worked out yet if there's a preferred method for us. As a participant, I think I would rather be able to see who I was trying to convince. But I also, from a scoring perspective, I know that while I was pushed all the way back in my chair and had a notepad on my lap, maybe that's not the thing that the students wanted to fixate on, is and the background of whatever. I was in my home office, and so there were tchotchkes all over the place, and I didn't want them to fixate on that. So it really is just it's a personal decision about the judges, and they'll probably, you can actually ask that during your pretrial. Are you going to be on camera the entire time, or all of you going to be on camera the entire time, or just the presiding judge, just so that you're prepared for the students that way. So let me go to pretrial. As I mentioned, that would be the time to notify the presiding judge and all of the judges about any roster changes that you might have. It's also a good time to address any tech issues that you're anticipating. And as you probably know, with this particular case, there are quite a few exhibits that have been stipulated to. If both teams are planning on using that exhibit, it may be worthwhile to, during pretrial, to ask that those exhibits that both teams are planning on using be admitted in advance, and then you don't have to go through the whole process. Now, you may get a presiding judge that will not let you do that. We're going to try our best to notify the judges that if both teams are okay with a particular exhibit being pre-entered, then they should go ahead and allow it. But there may be a judge who, no, I want to see how you go through that. So be prepared either way. But if an exhibit has been stipulated and both teams plan to use it, then we can save some time in that manner.
And Mr. Ruler,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. There is a question about screen sharing.
Yes.
They ask, so screen sharing exhibits is not necessary, just an option?
It is. It's just an option. It is a convenient way. I know that there are, in the traditional format, you might have an enlargement, or you might have an easel. This is basically the virtual easel, and can use it for that purpose. If you're all in the same room and you want to continue to use an easel or an enlargement, you can certainly do that. But I would make sure that as you practice and as you scrimmage, figure out how legible that's going to be, or what the best placement is for those exhibits. And how close to a camera does it need to be, so that the judges would be able to see it. That would be my only concern. So for example, I see on my camera, one of the people who is online is a Robin H, and I can actually see the whiteboard, and I can kind of sort of make that out. If I were to, if she were to be talking at the same time, that would get bigger on my screen as in the speaker view, and so I probably would be able to read that. So that might be one option, but the sharing screen is the kind of the easiest way to do that. If we have allowed for the middle school, if you are planning on highlighting particular lines, there is a function that you can use that will pre-highlight, as long as the exhibit is entered and you're not changing words. If you want to highlight just to draw attention to that, that is appropriate at this level. I don't know if that's going to be allowed at the national competition. It was allowed at the various competitions that I judged, and I found it very helpful because, again, you've got this screen that's now filled with text, and if it was highlighted in blue, then you knew that's what the students were going to be saying aloud, or read silently while I read aloud, that sort of thing. Impeachments on the screen share, that would have to do with something in their statement. If you were, it's the same function that if you were planning in person to have student, I'm going to be referring to page 14 of your statement, line whatever, you read silently while I read aloud, then yes, the appropriate part would be to screen share that. Or you can say, I assume that you have access to your own statement. Is that correct? And of course, the answer is yes, because every student should have access to all of the materials. Let me give you a moment to find line or page something, line something, and then refer to it that way. So again, there is a workaround. You do not have to use screen share. In some instances, screen share was working perfectly. In other instances, screen share was getting to be a very big hassle. It just depends on which platform you're using to access Zoom. And that was going to be something later on. We did find that if you have an Apple device or if you have a Chromebook, they both will access Zoom. They have no problem accessing Zoom and people can hear you and see you, but there tended to be the most technical issues we had were people using either Apple devices or Chromebooks that had not downloaded the Zoom application. So they were just basically clicking on that link that anyone can do and get you into a meeting. But without that application, without the most recent updates, that was the highest probability of technical failure. People on Android devices, people on PC devices weren't having nearly as many problems. So again, that's my admonition. Go ahead and set up scrimmages, even if it's scrimmages between your own team. Test out the technology to make sure it's all working the way you want it to work. Courtroom movement, as I mentioned before, I think we went on the record. There are times when everyone should be seated, and there is times when there can be an option for standing. So I think it says that obviously if you're a witness, you're seated, unless you're asked to actually stand and address an enlargement kind of in the traditional sense. I'm not sure how that would work particularly well. When a student is making an objection, they should be seated. But when a student is actually presenting either an opening or closing, or if they're questioning a witness, they have the option to either stay seated or to stand as they're comfortable and as their technology will allow. And as I mentioned, some people do better presenting when they are seated. Some people do better presenting when they are standing. And so it's whatever's comfortable and whatever technology will allow. If the student has been a long time mock trialer, they may be more comfortable standing. Just test out those camera angles and make sure the microphone can pick up what they, so that they are heard. The next is it's a touchy issue. It has to do with the background. There are virtual backgrounds. If you're planning on using a virtual background, make it sure it is a neutral, solid color background. Most people are not using backgrounds because if you start using a background, that increases the likelihood that the tech issue is going to happen. But if you've got a spot, if you've got an option for different spots, make sure it's someplace that's not as cluttered. Again, talking about my judging experience and all my tchotchkes in my home office, and the judges start focusing on what is that thing that's up on the shelf. But we also understand that students are looking for places that have the best internet connection and is the quietest. We had, during the middle school, we met lots of furry friends. Cats jumping on laps, dogs deciding they wanted to be on camera, brothers and sisters running through at high rates of speed and very loud decibels, phones ringing, other devices being used. There are all a myriad of things that's going to happen if the student is doing this from their home, which is what this is designed to allow. So if there is a spot that they can kind of arrange, that's going to be best. So again, try things out. We had the tournament that I judged at the end of April, or at the end of May rather, that was the national online competition based in Utah. I saw students in their bedrooms. You could see the posters on their wall and stuff like that, but they did a nice job because they had figured out camera angles. So when they were seated, they would adjust the camera, and when they were standing, they would adjust the camera, and it became very quick for them to do that. But that's why if you are making an objection and you're already seated, you don't have to stand up to make the objection. And if you are in the middle of a line of questioning and you're standing and someone objects, you don't have to adjust the camera down to answer the objection. It's in that same same format. So in terms of the audio and video, as I said, the presiding judge will be on and active. Whether they mute while the student is presenting or not is entirely up to them, but they should be on camera the entire time. Obviously, if you're a student making a presentation, you are on camera. The other judges may or may not be on camera, but any students that are not taking an active role, and certainly any observers, should be video off and audio off as well, so that it's not a distraction to the students and not a distraction on the Zoom screen as well, because there's a way for you to hide any of those blank tiles so that all you see are the ones who are on screen and actively participating. And I saw in the chat, someone asked about timers. That was the next thing on my list. The timers have two different options. First is to use that chat function, the same one that you've been using for your questions. And that is just to type in when it gets to be a certain time. So Lauren, if you would just go ahead and type in chat to all and just put 5 minutes, you will all see that it will pop up at the bottom of the screen. And that tells you that there's now 5 minutes remaining. Then at the end of each segment, so at the end of each witness, if a timer wants to give an update that there's now 15 minutes remaining, they can put that in as well in between the witnesses to provide kind of timing updates. The other option is, if you were in that traditional setting of everyone in one spot, you can have the traditional time cards. You can make them larger if you want. And so if the timekeeper is sitting in the back of the room, still on camera, they can hold that timing up, and the judges and everyone is notified about the time remaining. So that gives you a couple of different options. A judge may also ask a timekeeper audibly, can you tell my preference is for the timekeepers between each segment to let us know audibly how much time remains. And so you can kind of go with what the preference of the presiding judge is. We did put together a manual. I don't know if we're off script or on script at this point. Lauren, you'll have to tell me if what some of the things that we're talking about is actually in that manual or not, or it may need to be updated. We did an update after the middle school for high school, but if I'm just making stuff up now, we may need to update that manual again. It's just which way the wind is blowing tells me how we're going to work things. Okay, we talked about the technical advisor, the troubleshooting, the screen sharing, the recording function. We talked about recording and getting permission from everyone involved. You will have tech issues. Your tech issues may not be serious, which we all hope. Your tech issues may be serious. The most serious things are you get kicked off of Zoom. This happens frequently especially on Saturdays. When there is a high usage of data, if the students are all in their own space, all at home on their own, and a brother and sister are playing PlayStation, and mom or dad is watching Netflix, and someone else is on the web looking at favorite websites, there's a bandwidth problem, and a lot of times the student will just disconnect. Have no fear, they can easily rejoin by clicking that same link. They pop up in the waiting room, and Lauren and I can get them back into their spot as quickly as possible. A lot of times you will lose audio, or it starts to drop off. There seems to be a lag. There are two ways to do that. Number one is to rejoin the audio. That is one of the options that you can do, is try to connect again to the audio. If it really gets bad and you can be seen but not heard, or if you're kicked off completely and can't get back on, there is a dial-in option for Zoom. And the student can click on that dial-in option, and at least they can be heard, if not also seen. I had a situation where I was at a board meeting, and for some reason my audio was just not working. And so I was logged into Zoom so everyone could see me, but I was also on the phone at the same time talking. So I was actually on there twice, and that seemed to work just fine. So those are the basic troubles that you're going to get, especially if you try it all out with scrimmages or technical kind of run-throughs. And if you know in advance that there's going to be a technical issue, or you've experienced that technical issue every time, again, alert the presiding judge during pretrial that, we've had problems with this in the past, and so please be patient. We have adjusted not the timing of each spot necessarily, but the timing overall. So if a student gets cut off and is dropped off, we're going to allow that student to get back on. Usually it's less than a minute that it takes before they can get back on. If it takes more than 5 minutes, then the presiding judge will be responsible for popping out or sending someone to pop out and talk to me about it. Because if I see it's a student who keeps trying to get back on over and over and over again, I will tell the presiding judge to be patient. If it seems to be they just gave up, we need to talk with the coach or the team about having an alternate into that role while we try to get the student reconnected. Those are rare. We had one bad day of the entire thing, the preliminary rounds, playoff rounds, state tournament rounds, quarterfinals, semifinals, championship. It was the very first Saturday, and it was because everyone was trying to log in at the same time from their own house, and people were playing games and watching videos and surfing the web. And it was maximizing the bandwidth and causing some students from a particular schools to suffer because of it. Once we realized that, we kind of figured out how to cut down the number of devices trying to join. That situation was resolved. But you're going to have tech issues. We're going to be as flexible as possible. We're just trying to figure out a way to let the students do their thing and do it in a way that everyone is proud to be part of the program, and they feel listened to and looked at. Okay, I mentioned that the Zoom will open 30 minutes in advance. How you handle the room reassignments. I talked about the iPad and the Chromebooks. Two last things. One has to do with consultation with co-counsel. That happens sometimes in your trials where someone makes an objection and you don't know how to respond to it. And so you tell the judge, may I confer with co-counsel? Well, it's kind of difficult when everyone's on their own device. There are 2 ways or 3 ways to do that. Number one is if you are all in the same room, you can actually physically consult with co-counsel. Just mute the mic so that we're not in on your consultation with co-counsel. Number 2 would be to chat, but only to a specific person. So the chat function obviously is enabled because we want the timekeepers to be able to indicate time in chat. So co-counsel could chat and confer that way. Or if there's some other device, whether it's texting or some other networking application that the students have access to. I know that while my son is in class virtually, he's online with a bunch of his other friends and they're chatting at the same time he's in class. I have no idea how that all works, but he's got them up in like one corner and he's got the class in a different corner. And so I'm not sure what that's called, multi-chatting or multitasking. They can do that. So that's how you would confer with co-counsel. Understand that obviously during objections, conferring with co-counsel does not impact your time because the clock is stopped. But if it's in the middle of a presentation and you confer with co-counsel, the time keeps running just like it would in a normal live courtroom. And so that's going to suck some time, and just be aware of that as well. And then that brings up the final issue. As I was mentioning about the chatting and the other devices and things, not you, because you're all responsible coaches. There is a lot of opportunity to figure out creative ways to cheat on Zoom. Please don't go there with your students. Please discourage your students from finding those creative ways. I applaud their creativity, but it goes against the very nature of what we're trying to teach students. There are ways that, for example, you could have cue cards, you could have teleprompters, you could have your entire script written out, and maybe the judges never know, although judges are smarter than you think. And a lot of times when in the middle school, a student would have their witness statement or their line of questions up on their computer, the judge would actually see reflected off their glasses the line of questions. So they knew that they were just reading them. And there's nothing wrong with reading the questions. It's just that you're being evaluated separately. You know, one of the criteria is whether you are going off of a script or notes, or whether you are memorized or doing it free floating. But there are other ways to cheat as well. And I would just, as a parting comment, say, please encourage your students to do this with as much integrity and as much ethical standards as possible. Obviously, if we figure out that you were cheating, then we will take appropriate action. But the way that this works out, how are you ever going to truly know? And unless it's overwhelming one way or another, we just have to trust that you've taught your students well. So that's the ethics and honor code part of mock trial. So that's my roughly 24 items, and I've gone beyond my allotted hour. But before we go, if you've got additional questions, go ahead and either type them in the chat or just go ahead and chime in, and I'll try to answer them for you. And then it would be helpful to me is if you've got any specific questions that you didn't want everyone to hear, you can email them to me, or if you think there is a need for another Zoom meeting that addresses things that I did not touch on during this hour, again, send me an email, encourage me to set up another Zoom so that we can go ahead and address those issues, and then tape it, and then put it on the website for everyone to be bored to tears or benefit from. Any questions that you have?
Mr. Wheeler, I
Yes.
saw 2 questions in the chat.
Okay.
First, number 1 is from Steve. Are we submitting 2 rosters, one for defense and one for the plaintiff?
Yes. So you will notice that the links that I send you have a plaintiff roster and a defense roster. It asks for information that we don't normally put on a roster submitted to a judge. That's when you submit your roster, Lauren and I actually get 2 emails, one that says public and one that says private. The private is the one that has the coaching information, the school information, team name information, cell phone information, email, all of that stuff. The public one simply has the team code and then the student names and the roles that they're playing and their pronoun preference. So you do need to submit a plaintiff and a defense roster.
And then the other question is in regards to the manual. Where are the rules referenced? I noticed some points reference rules not included in the rules of procedure or evidence.
Yep. So we adopted this all summer. I was working with a national group focused on getting a set of rules that correspond with our national high school mock trial rules, and they either have different numbers or they have rules that we don't use. And so sometimes they are referencing things that either are not pertinent or in a different spot. If you have some specific things, specific examples, like this references rule 140 or something like that, and we don't have a rule 140, let me know what that is, and then we can address that in a separate update or a separate email. Any other questions or comments? Oh, you want me to pronounce the band? I created the band. It is Trunnius. I know it's pronounced, it's spelled Tyrannus, like Tyrannus Rex. I played around with that too, but it's Trunnius. And of course, Cluricon is pronounced Cluricon. Detays, it's Detays. And yeah, if you really want to go there, they all mean things. And if if your students want to go on a treasure hunt and try to figure out why I named characters the way I named characters, they can certainly do that. I always say that I write mock trial cases mostly to amuse myself. And if anybody else is amused along the way, I consider it a job well done. But it's mostly, lots of dad jokes and other pop culture references that only I get. The poor middle school kids had to be introduced to the B-52s, which are still around in some form, but not as popular as they once were, if they were even popular back then. And so all of these ones have some popular culture reference to them. I remember vividly one year, some of you who've been coaches for a long time remember cases. There was a case that I did that had a new sport that I invented. It was indoor arena Australian rules football. We called it battle ball, and all of the references that they were doing a derby. It was the United versus City, and all of the characters were named after either Northern generals or Southern generals of the Civil War. And I had a group of students who were so proud to show me the list that they had painstakingly compiled, and they even found one that I didn't realize I put in there. So they didn't get any extra points from the competition, but they had my admiration. So if you have students who are eager to find things, go right ahead and let them run wild. Well, unless there are other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting. Thank you so much for spending part of your Monday afternoon with us. I appreciate all of the energy and effort that you're taking with high school students this winter and this spring. It's a daunting task under normal circumstances. And when we add the pandemic and the different learning modules together, I'm not sure how you do it, but I am internally grateful that you are doing it. After middle school, some of the students, some of the coaches, some of the parents were effusive in their praise by saying that this was the most normal thing that they did. All the rest of the world was in complete and utter chaos, but mock trial was the same, and it wasn't the same, but it was something that they enjoyed doing, and it was normal. And so I'm hopefully you're making this normal for your students, and I'm hoping that their efforts will pay off. Cheryl, you have a hand up.
I have a question, but it doesn't really pertain to anybody else.
Okay.
So
if you want to hang out after
Yeah.
we end, I'm going to end the recording now. Pause, stop.